Alright, so this lesson is our first lesson in our experimental design / conducting an observational study unit. We're going to talk about different techniques of sampling so that we don't have to survey an entire population that could be up to hundreds of thousands of people, which is not reasonable. Sampling is a process. And it's a process where researchers, or whoever is conducting the survey, take observations. Instead of taking observations from the entire populations, they take observations from a part / sample of the population. So a sample of the population is a small part of the population. The goal of sampling is to get an accurate estimate of what the results from the actual survey, or from the actual population. So from the entire population is the wording that I'm going to use here. From the entire population would look like. So instead of conducting an experiment with hundreds of thousands of people, which would cost millions of dollars, you can instead conduct the experiment with 100. That's a lot easier to do. So there's a good type of sampling and a bad type of sampling. There's random sampling. And this is good because you get a pretty good idea of what the entire population would look like based on random sampling. And then the bad type of sampling is convenient sampling, even though it does save some time. Now we'll talk about what these mean in more detail as we go forward in the unit. We're not going to really touch on the bad sampling methods for a while. Instead, we're going to focus on the random sampling methods for now. Okay, so the first method of random sampling is called a simple random sample, also known as an SRS. Alright, now a simple random sample is if you have a population. Then you basically take random people from that population. So you can either do this by like assigning numbers or like popsicle sticks or things like that. And they choose participants randomly from a population. All population members have an equal probability of being selected. The more participants you have, the better the data. A stratified random sample is the next one. And stratified means that you are creating subgroups. So stratified random sample, note that it's still a random sample, means that you take the population and you divide it into groups. So it divides the population into non-overlapping groups called strata. So let's say in this case I take the population and I divide it into 4 groups. You can see that the groups have no overlap. There's no one like on the line or anything like that. And then I take a simple random sample from both. Or from, not from both, from all of the groups. So I take a simple random sample from within each group. So you take a simple random sample from within each group. So a good example of this is if we're trying to survey King William High School. And you're collecting data from like about, say, how many hours of sleep do you get at night, so that you can get an estimate of what percentage of the population is sleeping well. Your strata could be 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Those are 4 non-overlapping groups. And you take a simple random sample from all of them. A cluster sample is the last one. Note that it doesn't say random sample. This is because cluster isn't fully random. What you do is you divide the population into groups once more that are near each other, and they're called clusters. So then you include everyone within each cluster in your sample. So the best way to draw this is, once again I'm going to draw an oval. Sorry that it's low instead of high, it's just I don't want to draw it right here. So a cluster would be, say, right here. Everybody within this circle. And then you include everyone within it. Then pick another one. Now, cluster sampling is best done when the clusters themselves are randomly picked. And then you pick everyone within the cluster. Now, clusters work best when they look like smaller versions of the entire population, which isn't really that hard to do when you pick them like this. Because if you pick 30 people, typically those 30 people are going to model the entire population, as long as the population itself isn't super geographically, like, it's not like this cluster only has people with one specific trait or things like that. As long as that's not present, then you can usually take a cluster from anywhere. If it is present, then you have to pick carefully. Alright, anyway, let's move to the other side of the page. So we're going to label each scenario as simple, random, stratified, or cluster. A survey was conducted to understand the average amount of time students spend on homework. Each student in the school was assigned a number, and a random number generator was used to select a certain number of students from the population. The thing that this doesn't include is any notion of division into groups. So in other words, the entire population was given random numbers, and then a certain number of students were selected from that population. That is a simple random sample. A study was conducted attempting to measure the study habits of high school students. The school population was divided into freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and 35 members of each class were selected. So in other words, it was divided into freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and 35 from each class were selected. Okay, this is a stratified sample because you're taking some from each. Alright, a company wanted to collect feedback from its customers. All customers were assigned a unique ID number, and several random ID numbers were selected. This is from the entire population. So once again, random ID numbers were selected. That is a simple random sample. It's not cluster because it's not like they chose everyone. It's not like they chose one specific store and picked everyone within it. It's not that. They gave every customer an ID number and then picked randomly. Alright, out of the several existing neighborhoods within the city, the survey randomly selected 6 neighborhoods. Sorry I skipped to the top, but that's not really relevant for determining what kind of survey it is, or what kind of sample it is, rather. And the sample included everyone within those 6 neighborhoods. So 6 neighborhoods were selected, and everyone within was surveyed. This is cluster. Alright, a company wanted to assess employee satisfaction across its manufacturing plants. A few plants were chosen at random, and then all employees within those plants were given a satisfaction survey. So a few plants were chosen, let's say 3, and all employees within were given the survey. That is once again cluster. If this were stratified, by the way, just to clear this up, if this were stratified, then you would have all of the plants picking some of the employees. So some of the employees within all of the different plants would be taking the survey if it were stratified. But because only a few plants were selected and all employees within, that's cluster. Alright, a survey was conducted. The population was divided into income groups. It lists them. 50 households from each were chosen. So it was divided into income groups. We have low, mid, and high. And then 50 households from each were chosen. That is stratified.